Well, for more, let's speak now to Craig Prescott. He's professor of law at the School of History, Law and Social Sciences at Bangor University in Wales. Hello, Craig. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
So I'd like to talk about some of these difficulties with you, perhaps starting with the Caribbean. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, as well as the Earl and Countess of Wessex, embarked upon their Platinum Jubilee tours in the Caribbean in March and April. And despite all of the pomp and ceremony, the reality, of course, is that many people were very apathetic about their presence. What do you think has changed, and what role does the Queen have to play in that?
I think the change is I think there are two things. Firstly, there is the Black Lives Matter campaign. There has been an increasing awareness of Britain's past in these Caribbean countries. But also, I think just at a more basic level, that there's just been a divergence of the UK from the Caribbean. The UK joined the European Union in the 1970s and saw its future very much focused towards Europe as opposed to the rest of the Commonwealth and geopolitically more broadly. Now, okay, the UK left the EU recently, but that left the Caribbean countries really to find their own way in many ways. And I think it's a natural divergence as time has gone on. The links have just sort of started to wither away, with the Queen really being the last of those strong links that the UK has to some of these Caribbean countries.
Do you think their withering influence in those Caribbean countries is a failure, or is it just kind of a natural evolution, a natural change that takes place?
I think it's a natural evolution once these countries become self-governing and independent, whether that is to retain the Queen as head of state or merely to become a member of the Commonwealth. What they do, which direction they travel in, is something that's up to them. They may find themselves looking more closely to America because that's the big power closest to them. But also that there's been some concern perhaps that China have been looking at investing in these countries. And that just shifts the political balance away from maintaining links with the UK.
Do you think they have a major influence politically, though?
You mean the British?
The royal family.
The royal family, generally, I don't think so. In these Caribbean countries, they simply aren't there enough to have a strong presence or a strong political influence. What's happened over the past few years, even before the pandemic, was that we saw Caribbean tours get shorter, where they just, essentially they're there for just a few days. So, it's just part of this sort of gradual decline of the standing of the monarchy in these Caribbean countries and perhaps in other countries in the Commonwealth as well.
I think perhaps a part of that gradual decline that you described there is maybe related to their response to the different concerns about racial justice, focus on Caribbean nations' history, calls for financial reparations for slavery. All of the responses to these things, I think, have visibly failed to convince. What do you think that they're doing wrong?
I think that they've been blindsided, I think, to some extent by the strength of opinion held by people in the Caribbean. And, they simply haven't acquired any sort of strategy to respond to that. And, we saw this really with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's tour recently, that they were caught entirely by surprise by the strength of feeling. And the monarchy doesn't move in a nimble way. It has to be much more deliberate and considerate, and I don't think it's able to keep pace with events in the way that maybe some people now want.
If it's not able to keep pace with events, do you think that its very survival is at risk in the decades ahead, especially as we look towards the monarchy after Queen Elizabeth?
I think it's particularly a case in some countries in the Commonwealth, yes, because the issue of reparations or giving an apology isn't really a matter for the royal family itself. It's a matter for the British government, and that leads to political difficulties, perhaps between Buckingham Palace and Downing Street, if they want to take different approaches. But even then, it still may not be enough. So I can see that, the Caribbean countries are going in their own direction, and that might lead to them, choosing to adopt a presidential system, but perhaps remaining part of the Commonwealth. But as the Queen has always said, the choice is entirely theirs. They are self-governing. They can choose their direction.
So let's maybe shift gears to another difficulty that the Queen has faced in recent months. Her son, Prince Andrew, of course, has been more or less kept out of the spotlight since reaching that multi-million-pound settlement with Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of sexual abuse. Now, he stepped back from royal duties in 2019, was stripped of his honorary military titles earlier this year. How do you see the Queen's handling of that scandal, and do you think that the British public has approved of her response?
The Queen and the royal family more generally was placed in an acutely difficult position because, these allegations were made. They were very, very serious allegations, but there were no criminal charges brought. And, it was in light of the civil case that was brought against Prince Andrew that things started to shift. So these allegations had been around for some considerable time. And, some people felt that the response from Buckingham Palace was too slow. I'm not entirely sure how much more quickly they could have moved. However, now that he is sort of out of the sort of working pool of members of the royal family, there is a stark separation between him and say Prince William or the Duchess of Cambridge, who are working members. So I think that there was a relief when it happened, and I think some felt it was overdue when that separation was made. The issue is, what does Prince Andrew do now? There was some concern that Prince Andrew assisted the Queen at a recent service earlier this year, in February, where he sort of ended up taking, being front and center of things. I'm not sure we'll see that this weekend, because that didn't go down well.
All right, Craig Prescott, well, thank you very much. We'll be speaking to you later on in the afternoon as the commemorations continue. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.